Hello everyone, and how are you today? At this juncture, I am inviting you to go with me as I am going to discuss to you the topic addressing methodological challenges in conducting an impact evaluation research. My name is Ronnie M. Valles, a PhD BRA Level 2 student, and I'm your discussant at this hour. For the purpose of this lecture, I have enumerated learning objectives that we should all attain at the conclusion of this session. First, describe what are the different methodological challenges in an impact evaluation research. Second, identify some approaches to address properly these challenges to maintain the reliability, validity, and robustness of the impact evaluation results. And third, cite examples dealing and addressing varied challenges in an impact evaluation research. Now let's have some recap on our established understanding about evaluation. What is impact evaluation? Impact evaluation is a type of evaluation that seeks to answer a specific cause and effect question. What is the impact or cause and effect of a program on an outcome of interest? The focus is only on the impact, that is, the changes directly attributed to a program modality, or design innovation. The next question is, why we need to evaluate? So, we need to evaluate because program managers or policymakers need the data gathered to be used as basis in policy making process or decisions to improve or to stop a certain program. Or shall we say, some focus on measuring and reporting the inputs and immediate outputs of a program. Now, on the previous discussions, we have identified methods to be used as how to go over in an impact evaluation process, which includes number 1, randomized assignments, number 2, instrumental variables, number 3, regression discontinuity design, number 4, difference in differences, and number 5, matching. What do you mean by randomized assignment as a method? Each eligible unit has the same probability of being selected for treatment, ensuring equivalence between the treatment and comparison groups in both observed and unobserved characteristics. Instrumental variables, it is a method relies on some external source of variation to determine treatment status. Third, regression discontinuity design, or RDD, is an impact evaluation method that is adequate for programs that use a continuous index to rank potential participants and that have a cutoff point along the index that determines whether or not potential participants are eligible to receive the program. Difference in differences. It compares the changes in outcomes over time between units that are enrolled in a program and units that are not enrolled in the program. And number 5, matching. Matching uses large data sets and statistical techniques to construct the best possible comparison group based on observed characteristics. All these methods share the objective of constructing valid comparison groups so that the true impacts of a program can be estimated. Let's take note that the basis for selecting an impact evaluation method are a program available resources, Second, criteria for selecting beneficiaries. And third, timing for implementation and purpose. The most impact evaluation methods produce valid estimates of the counterfactual only under specific assumptions. What do you mean by counterfactual? Counterfactual, that is, what the outcome would have been for program participants if they had not participated in the program. Thus, it means in any impact evaluation requires that the evaluation team or a researcher find a comparison group to estimate what would have happened to the program participants without the program, comparing those who received. Okay, let's proceed now in our main topic. So in what scenario a possible problem in a chosen method comes in? The main risks in applying any given method is when the underlying assumptions do not hold true, resulting in biased estimates of the program's impact. One scenario is most of impact methods data gathering assume that programs affects in a linear way for its population. And here comes a result says some differences of responses among other recipients. This is now what we call heterogeneous treatment effects. Finally, this can be compared to a population of evil purple minions applied by a formula slowly turns into a good minions, but sadly not true to all. How to address this one? Based on your preliminary assessment that different subpopulations may have experienced the impact of a program very differently, then you should consider stratified sampling by each subpopulation than having random sampling, which cannot have sufficient information for its different groups. Another scenario is when you are conducting an impact evaluation, you may also induce unintended behavioral responses from the population that you are studying of. This is now what we call unintended behavioral effects, and elaborated on three following situations. Number 1, the what we called Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effects occur when the mere fact that you are observing people making them behave differently. Hawthorne effect refers to experiments that were carried out from 1924 to 1932 at the Hawthorne Works, an electric equipment factory in the U.S. state of Illinois. And the second one is the John Henry effect. John Henry effect happens when comparison units works harder to compensate for not being offered a treatment. This is the known John Henry, the legendary steel-driving man, set himself to prove he could drive railroad spikes faster and better than the newly invented steam-powered machine driver. And the third one is the substitution bias. Substitution bias is another behavioral effect that affects the comparison group. The units that were not selected to receive the program may be able to find good substitutes through their own initiatives. So, how to address unintended behavioral anomalies? If you encountered these behavioral challenges, you can address it by setting up additional comparison groups that are unaffected by the intervention, one that allows you to clearly test for necessary responses. Another one is you can gather qualitative data in order to better understand the behavioral responses that could affect the validity of the results. The third scenario is the imperfect compliance. Imperfect compliance happens when some units assigned to the treatment group do not receive treatment, and when some units assigned to the comparison group receive treatment. Imperfect compliance can occur in a variety of ways. The first, not intended participants participate. This actually happens when the units that are assigned to a program choose not to participate. Intended participants not included due to admin lapses. The third, some comparison group mistakenly offered. The next, some units of comparison group managed to participate in the program even though it is not offered to them. The next is the program is assigned based on continuous eligibility index, but the eligibility cutoff is not strictly enforced. And lastly, the selective migration. It will take place based on treatment status. For example, the evaluation may compare outcomes for treated and untreated municipalities, but individuals may choose to move to another municipality if they do not like the treatment status of their municipality. Now, how to address imperfect compliance? You can address imperfect compliance by using the instrumental variable approach. Instrumental variable approach contains an external source of variation that helps you clear up or correct the bias. In the case of randomized assignment with imperfect compliance, a dummy variable that takes the value of 1 if the unit was originally assigned to the treatment group, and the value of 0 if the unit was originally assigned to the comparison group. In the analysis, two-stage regression that allows you to identify the impact of the treatment on the compliers. First, it is undesirable to have a large portion of the comparison group enrolled in the program. And the second one, it is undesirable to have a large portion of the treatment group remain unenrolled. The fourth scenario happens when an intervention affects a non-participant and it might be positive or negative. This is what we call a spillover effect. There are 4 types of spillover effects. First, externalities. Second, social interactions. Third, context equilibrium. And fourth, general equilibrium. What do you mean by externalities? Externalities varies into positive and negative. These are effects that go from treated subjects to untreated subjects. For example, vaccinating the children in a village against influenza decreases the probability that non-vaccinated inhabitants of the same village will catch this disease. And the negative is, for example, a farmer's crop could be partially destroyed when his neighbor applies an herbicide on his own plot and some of the herbicide blows to the other side of the property line. The second is the social interactions. Social interaction spillovers might result from social and economic interactions between treated and untreated populations, leading to indirect impacts on the non-treated. For example, A student who receives a tablet as part of a learning enhancement program, but shares the tablet with another student who does not participate in the program. The third one is the context equilibrium. Context equilibrium, these effects happen when an intervention affects behavioral or social norms within the given context, such as a treated locality. For example, increasing the amount of resources that treated health centers receive so they can extend the range of services might affect the expectations from the population about what should be the range of services offered at all health centers. Lastly, the general equilibrium. These effects happen with intervention affect the supply and demand for goods of services and thereby change the market price for those services. For example, a program that gives poor women vouchers to use private facilities for childbirth might suddenly increase the demand for services at private facilities and thereby increasing the price of the services for everyone else. Now, how to address spillover effect? By designing an impact evaluation with consideration of possible spillovers. The first thing to do is to realize that the objective of the evaluation needs to be expanded, while a standard evaluation aims to estimate the impact of a program on an outcome of interest for units receiving the treatment. The evaluation with spillovers will have to answer two questions. Number 1, the standard evaluation question for the direct impact. What is the impact of a program on an outcome of interest for units receiving the treatment? This is the direct impact that the program has on treated groups. To estimate the direct impact on treated groups, you will need to choose the comparison group in such a way that it is not affected by spillovers. For example, you might require that the treatment and comparison villages, clinics, or households be located sufficiently far from one another that spillovers are unlikely. The second question, an additional evaluation question for the indirect impact. What is the impact of the program on an outcome of interest for units not receiving the treatment? This is the indirect impact that the program has on non-treated groups. To estimate the direct impact on a non-treated groups, you should identify an additional comparison group for each non-treated group that may be affected by spillovers. For example, community health workers may undertake household visits to provide information to parents about the benefits of improved dietary diversity for their children. The fifth scenario occurs when parts of the sample disappear over time and researchers are not able to find all initial members of the treatment and comparison groups in follow-up surveys or data. This is what we call attrition bias. For example, of 2,500 households surveyed in the baseline, researchers are able to find only 2,300 in the follow-up surveys 2 years later. If researchers go back and attempt to survey the same group, say 10 years later, they might be able to find even fewer original households. How to address attrition bias? First, check whether the baseline characteristics of the units that drop out of the sample are statistically equal to baseline characteristics of the units that were successfully surveyed. As long as the baseline characteristics of both groups are not statistically different, your new sample should continue to represent the population of interest. The second, you need to check whether the attrition rate in the treatment group is similar to the attrition rate in the comparison group. If the attrition rates are significantly different, then there is a concern that your sample is no longer valid, and you may need to use various statistical techniques to correct this. One common method is inverse probability weighting, a method that statistically reweights the data, in this case, the follow-up data, so as to correct the fact that the portion of the original respondent is missing. The method reweights the follow-up sample so it looks similar to the baseline sample. Now, we have able to identify the 5 methodological challenges such as heterogeneous treatment effects, second, unintended behavioral effects, third, imperfect compliance, and fourth, spillovers, and lastly, number 5, attrition, and also their means and ways to address. Now, I have prepared some exercises for you to practice. You can pause this video and give a try, then check if you got it right. We have column for scenario, methodological challenge, and how to address. The first scenario, your task is to evaluate the impact of the school feeding program. However, upon investigation, some recipient students did not consume but rather share foods to their classmates who are comparison group. Can you give it a try? The answer is, it is under the social interactions spillover. How to address? The comparison group will have indirect impact to the intervention. Thus, comparison does not accurately represent what would have happened to the treatment group in the absence of the treatment. You may refer to find another units of study. The second one is the very popular SAP. Your task is to evaluate the impact of Social Amelioration Program or SAP during this COVID-19 crisis, but you gathered various responses, effects, and saying they receive different amounts. The answer is, it is under the heterogeneous treatment effect. How to address? The SAP or the Social Amelioration Program is given by sectoral group such as under DSWD, DOLE, TTI, DE, DILG. So amount vary depending on sector and geographical location. Regional wages. We should consider stratified sampling by each subpopulation in our assessment. Another exercise. The scenario is, your task is to evaluate the impact of DRRM program. When the school knew that a group of evaluators will come and do monitoring, they instantly install necessary equipment indicated in the DRRM manual. What do you think is the scenario or the problem? The challenge is under the Hawthorne effect, unintended behavioral effects. So how to address? To counter this, the evaluator can gather qualitative data in order to better understand the behavioral responses that could affect the validity of the results. The last scenario is your task is to evaluate the impact of anti-insurgency program of the government in a certain far-flung area, but the participants of the program have migrated to other places due to armed conflict. What do you think is the challenge. So the challenge is under the attrition bias. How to address this one? You need to check whether the baseline characteristics of the units that drop out of the sample are statistically equal to baseline characteristics of the units that were successfully resurveyed. If not, we could apply statistical techniques like inverse probability weighting. So lastly, in the actual impact evaluation study, you may encounter these challenges, but bear in mind that this could be addressed and minimized through some ways we have already discussed and even by our expertise of the subject at hand. Let's all accept the challenge. Thank you for learning with me. Have a nice day.